Hello and welcome to the Martini Shot, home of movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails. My name is Brandon. Before we get into the review of Kung Fu Panda 4, let's make a cocktail that will bring out your inner fighter with a drink called the Dragon Warrior. Dragon Warrior is a title bestowed to those who have mastered the highest level of Kung Fu, which Po somehow has bumbled his way into achieving. But it's also the name of this Asian-influenced cocktail. Made in the style of a whiskey sour, the cocktail uses Japanese whiskey, yuzu, and black sesame seed syrup to craft something very unique. It's slightly tart with a rich nuttiness and oakiness to it, while having a creamy texture thanks in part to the addition of an egg white. Finally, it's topped with a bit of tahini to give it some color, as well as a slight hit of dragon fire. May it bring peace to your inner turmoil, or at least pair well with some dumplings. Let's get into it. This will be a shaken cocktail, so go ahead and grab your shaker. First, we're gonna be starting with a roasted black sesame seed syrup. Fairly easy to make. I'll leave the recipe on screen so you can make it yourself. And you're gonna be adding 1/4 ounce. Next, you're gonna be following that up with some yuzu juice. If you're not familiar with this Asian fruit, it is very similar to a lemon. However, it does have some notes of orange and tangerine thrown in as well. And if you're like me, you're probably gonna have to find it bottled. I don't really know if you can find fresh yuzu unless you have an Asian market near you, but you're gonna be doing 1 ounce. And then finally, for our alcohol, 2 ounces of Japanese whiskey. And now for that texture component, we are gonna be adding 1 egg white. And just like all the other cocktails that utilize egg white, we are first gonna be dry shaking this. This is gonna allow the egg white to aerate and emulsify and give us that nice creamy texture that's not going to be impeded by the ice just yet. So shake with no ice for about 15 to 20 seconds. Then finally, throw some ice in the shaker and shake to chill. Go ahead and strain that into a chilled coupe glass. And once it's developed that nice frothy head on top, go ahead and add a dusting of tahini. And there you go, now you have the Dragon Warrior. This is very reminiscent of some Asian desserts I've seen that use black sesame seed syrup in it. You get that nice, rich, kind of nutty taste that pairs really well alongside the fluffiness and the slight tartness. The yuzu here is definitely not as sour as lemon juice would usually be in this kind of cocktail, but the flavor is still there and it kind of comes in for more of like a limoncello style flavor rather than a tart lemon candy. So you get this nice balance between the fluffy texture of the cocktail, the slight brightness from the yuzu, and that oakiness and nuttiness from the black sesame seed syrup, as well as the Japanese whiskey. And the tahini on top is a nice touch. It adds a nice little spice while also bringing in that flavor of lime, which I think pairs well with the citrus elements that are already working in this cocktail. I think this is a really interesting riff on a whiskey sour, one that's going to feel familiar, but it's also going to take you along for a ride of these different flavors you wouldn't really expect in this kind of cocktail. It's certainly a bit out there with some of the ingredients, but I highly recommend, if you have the means, give this a try. It's definitely very different from a whiskey sour, but I really enjoy what it's doing here with its woody, slightly chocolate kind of taste. Now that we have our drink, let's dive right into the review of Kung Fu Panda 4. Kung Fu Panda is one of those series right up there alongside Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon as the pillars of DreamWorks animation. A series unafraid to be goofy and cartoonish while also finding room to be dark and emotional, landing an impressive balance that has made this series fun to experience as both a kid and as an adult. It's been a commercial and critical success, bringing the wuxia genre of Chinese fiction to a young Western audience. You start with this, and before you know it, your kid is watching Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. With 3 films and several spin-off shows under its karate belt, we have reached the 4th installment. So what you may be wondering is not only will my kid like it, but will I like it as well? To be brief, yeah, I think there's enjoyment to be had by all here. It's still well animated and houses some fun action sequences that definitely lean into that kung fu film aesthetic, while still remaining playful and silly enough to most likely garner the attention of kids. Though, if I had to compare this with the rest of the films, I honestly think this is perhaps the weakest one. The emotional narrative found in the previous films isn't very strong here, which essentially leads to an uneventful character journey for Po, a semi-unneeded introduction of new character Zhen, as well as a unique yet underwhelming villain in the Chameleon. It just ends up feeling pretty middle of the road. Not exactly terrible, but not spectacular by any means. Based on some production notes that have surfaced recently, this could have been a very different film and could explain why this one feels as underwhelming as it does. Apparently, producers wanted this to be semi-live action and Po is gonna be in a box for 20 minutes. Sounds awful, but let's discuss the version that we actually got. In Kung Fu Panda 4, Dragon Master Po is informed that it's time to pass on his title to an apprentice so that he may ascend to the title of spiritual leader of the Valley of Peace. Po shows hesitance with leaving the world of butt-kicking behind, especially as a new, shape-shifting villain named the Chameleon arises with plans for world domination. Reluctantly teaming up with a fox thief named Zhen, Po sets out to stop this new foe and maybe learn something about wisdom or whatever along the way. There's not much to say on the returning voice cast, as guys like Jack Black, Dustin Hoffman, and James Hong are all nailing it as usual. I'd mostly like to talk about the newer characters and actually some noticeably absent returning characters. Zhen is voiced by Awkwafina, which you're probably already rolling your eyes at. I, for one, do think she's a bit overhated, but maybe the farewell is just doing an immeasurable amount of heavy lifting for me. I will agree that I think she's become too overexposed in Hollywood, really just feeling like everyone's go-to snarky female voice actor. Her voice is definitely unique, but it's everywhere, and I think it needs to be reeled back a bit. The character of Zhen honestly isn't super interesting, not really drawing too many parallels or stark differences to Po, aside from her being a criminal and him essentially being a cop. She just doesn't add a ton to the story, bringing nothing all that new out of Po, but she's not annoying or egregiously designed, so she's just fine. Viola Davis gives a pretty great performance as the villain the Chameleon. She's a chameleon, as you may have guessed. I assume they just got tired of coming up with new villain names. Her ability to shapeshift into Po's past foes is a super interesting idea, one that does lead to some sparse but entertaining fight scenes. Her backstory and motivation isn't all that compelling though, especially compared to the likes of Tai Lung and Lord Shen. She's just mad because she was told she was too small to practice Kung Fu, and now she's going to steal the power from Kung Fu masters. Which is funny because there's literally a praying mantis on the Furious 5. This maybe could have worked, but it doesn't tie into how she's eventually dealt with, which could have brought it all full circle and showed the error of her ways, making for a more meaningful climax. As far as returning characters go, we do get a little side plot following the hijinks of Po's two fathers, Ping and Li Shan, which is fairly enjoyable, but if you're looking for more from the series mainstays, Shifu and the Furious 5, don't hold your breath. Shifu is on the sidelines for most of the story, while the Furious 5 are absent throughout the whole thing. No doubt to avoid how much it must cost to get Angelina Jolie or Seth Rogen. These important characters in Po's journey make no real impact on this film, which may be a shame to fans of the series. Where the film manages to bolster itself is through its animation and fight scenes. The action is still well choreographed and staged, making use of different environments and setups to be creative. Whether it be a battle amongst several ancient artifacts, a chase through a busy city street, or an ever-changing gauntlet of the ghosts of Po's past, the film does manage to uphold that trademark butt-kicking that the series was founded on. The story itself moves pretty fast, jumping into the conflict almost immediately, while the constant influx of action helps to keep things interesting. There aren't too many slower character moments, which does hinder the overall impact of the film, but it also means there's not a lot of BS to wade through to get to the good stuff. Truthfully, I wish there was more to say about this film. While it has the same energy and fluidity of the past three films, there's a significant lack of heart when it comes to the characters we know and love, as well as the newer additions. Like I said, it's not outright terrible, but certainly feels like the weakest in the series so far. Kids are probably going to love it though, thanks to its action and farts. And us adults, well, we get treated to something truly special by the end. A cover of Britney Spears' Baby One More Time by Jack Black's band Tenacious D. It's one of those things you didn't realize you wanted until you have it, and once you have it, you wonder how you could have ever possibly lived without it. For my rating, I'm giving this film 3 lizards out of 5. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Martini Shot. If you saw Kung Fu Panda 4, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. If you like what you saw here and would like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me across all social media channels. Those links are down in the description below. If you enjoy movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails, be sure to check out my website, martinishot.blog. Until next time, thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Live deliciously, but please remember to drink responsibly.